I think that it's probably gonna be time for eat. After that, I'll go to Twitch and I'll go to kick him.
This region, the Pacific, recently it's heating up. And now is probably a good time to rewind and remember what this region looked like back when there was a war happening out here on these islands, a war between great powers. Let's start right here, at the end of the 1800s, when Japan is expanding fast. Conquering territory and taking the resources, becoming a powerful empire. By 1940, their empire looks like this. It includes hundreds of remote islands out here in the Pacific, and Japan uses these colonies to extract resources that fed this growing conquest. But they don't have everything they need yet. They still rely on the US for the most vital of resources, oil and metal. Now, the US doesn't necessarily like how aggressive Japan is being in their region, but they tolerate it. That is, until Japan allies itself with Nazi Germany, and then continues its expansion into a French colony and threatens to completely cut off the US from its ally China. So the US, along with Britain and the Netherlands, cut Japan off of oil, gas, iron, and steel. These are vital resources, so this is a major blow to Japan.
Yo, Johnny Aris, man, if you ever hear this, you're not gonna hear this, I don't give a fuck. This at the top is a really well done the way to navigate the video for viewers. I wish it was a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit less blurry, so that we see that, because I barely saw it and I was like, this is kind of cool.
Calculate that they only have 2 more years before they run out of this vital energy. They must act quickly, so they start looking further south to land that is known to have a lot of oil. The problem for Japan is that this is all controlled by European empires.
Download the flight simulator while watching
Japan makes a
this
plan
video
to kick out all of these Europeans and
No,
establish
we're not
their
doing
own
that.
access to oil and metal, so they aren't reliant on outsiders. And they sell this ambitious plan to their people by saying that they
I don't know what just happened, man. I lost the term.
to kick out all European empires out of oil. The problem for Japan is that this is all controlled by European empires. Japan makes a plan to kick out all of these Europeans and establish their own access to oil and metal, so they aren't reliant on outsiders. And they sell this ambitious plan to their people by saying that they actually want to liberate Asia from European domination. So, in December 1941, they initiate this plan, sending ships and planes to drop bombs all over the region that they want to conquer. And to stop the Americans from coming to the Europeans' rescue, Japan has already sent a large chunk of its navy to surprise the Americans by bombing their navy in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. It was their first step for kicking off this larger offensive.
That's pretty
The attacks on
expansionist.
Pearl Harbor and all over Asia were a huge, bold, and risky move for Japan. No one thought they would
Chad, that's a lot of enemies and not a lot of close allies to pull this off, no? Seems like you're putting a lot of people against you.
do it. It came as a massive surprise, and as a result, it was incredibly successful for Japan's goals. The US and its allies are now at war, but beating back Japan will not be easy. Japan has a powerful navy, and not only is America's Pacific Fleet severely damaged because of the attack on Pearl Harbor, but around this same time, Hitler has taken the moment to declare war on the US, dragging them into the European theater of World War II. Over the next 7 months, Japan takes even more territory.
Powerful and resourceful gangsters have banded together to make war upon the whole human race. Their challenge has now been flung at the United States of America. Together with other free peoples, we are now fighting to maintain our right to live.
Expansionist? Say, you're mad at me for saying that it's expansionist for them to take all this land? But in 1940, brother, like the age of expansion like that is kind of over, isn't it? I mean, yeah, I get it. There's like wars and people want to, they're kind of pushing and doing all that, and it's not really working crazy, right? But the age of getting a whole country and coming as yours is ancient, very ancient. So you're saying it? Well, dude, this was somebody else's country now. No, but it's a colony. Yeah, but that was back then. You cannot apply old standards of expansion to today's fucking modern world. It's not. It's brain dead fucking
freedom,
concept.
In common decency, without fear of assault. We are now in this war.
Otherwise, get out of your house and leave it to the fucking indigenous or fucking the people that were there before then. If you're against this concept, then get the fuck out of your house and leave it to the people that were fucking living in tents, motherfucker.
The US has to surrender the Philippines, its foothold in the Pacific, and Japan forces capture and kill tens of thousands of American and Filipino troops in just one of what would become many horrific war crimes they commit during this war.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Pacific, and Japan forces capture and kill tens of thousands of American and Filipino troops in just one of what would become many horrific war crimes they commit during this war. By the middle of 1942, Japan has achieved its goals of kicking out European empires and securing for itself a massive empire full of resources. They're now self-sufficient, and they're growing. And they're not done. They're drunk on all of this success, and some military leaders want to keep pushing east, all the way to here, which would cut the US off from its big ally Australia.
Wait, how do you hold a piece of water?
So they set their sights on this American base, located on a small atoll called Midway. If they could take Midway, the US would be so weak,
Dude,
Japan
chat.
calculates, that
All the fucking, chat, all the TV series, whatever, right? I watched every TV series from beginning to end with my dad, because my dad is like a big war guy. He has these fucking massive bookshelves. It's only war shit. The whole thing is war. And every day he let me watch with him some documentaries about Midway and shit. And I'd watch all of it.
They would be forced to settle this conflict, leaving Japan with all of this newly conquered territory. Alas, that's not what happened. In May of 1942, Japan sends a massive fleet of hundreds of planes, accompanied by battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines, as well as 4 of their precious aircraft carriers. Now remember, this is World War II, and you can't really fight a war out here in the ocean without aircraft carriers, which enabled Japan's planes to land and refuel while fighting deep out in this ocean. Aircraft carriers are vital, so Japan is preparing to conquer Midway. But what they don't know is that American codebreakers in Hawaii have cracked Japan's encrypted communication and are aware of their battle plans days before the attack. This makes all the difference, and in a 4-day battle, the US defeats Japan's navy at Midway, destroying all 4 of their precious aircraft carriers in the process.
The odds looked impossible, but when it was all over, the Japanese had suffered their greatest naval defeat in history.
It's a huge blow to Japan's momentum, and from here, the US and its allies start to turn the tide on this war in the Pacific. Hey, I know we're talking about World War II, but
I always find it interesting, like military and shit like that. Dude, you think it's not like a bunch of stuff or whatever? It's just 4 things. Look at how much like distance and control you get. Just 4 things, and it's like a massive
turn
difference.
The tide on this war in the Pacific.
Because yeah, like
little. We're talking about World War II, but I just want to pause really quick. As was teaching and processing of your thoughts, been a game changer. What they do is the therapist, which is quickly you better distance. So here's a problem for both sides. Distance. It's sort of hard to fathom the distances out here. Like, you could fit the mainland United States in just one small part of the Japanese Empire. And remember that the US military has to travel thousands of kilometers just to get here. Distance is also a problem for Japan, who, yes, just conquered all of this territory, but that means that it now has to ship resources back to the mainland. It has to get men, doctors, food, and supplies out to all of this land thousands of kilometers away, creating brand new supply routes. We found this old Japanese map drawn up during the war that shows all of these colonies shaded with a red marker and showing this dizzying web of supply lines needed to keep the war going. This was a logistical nightmare for Japan, but it was also a key vulnerability that the US would exploit in this conflict. So the US begins cutting into the Japanese Empire. It's off to a slow start, but eventually they settle onto a strategy of targeting certain islands, not the ones that were the most fortified, but the ones that had the most webs. Get them one step closer to the Japanese mainland, but also give them proximity to these supply lines. the supply lines that keep Japan's war machine running. The US starts conquering these lesser fortified islands and using them to target the ships that carry food and weapons and supplies throughout the Japanese Empire. I found this data set that shows every merchant vessel that the US and its allies sunk during these years. It's a lot. American submarines alone would go on to sink 5 million tons of Japanese shipping and naval vessels. This strategy of targeting the supply lines was a game changer
That must be
for the
fucking
US,
annoying to deal with.
allowing them to weaken the Japanese Empire by targeting its cargo.
Chat, it's why island maps are fucking shit if you've established on a land map for a long time. Island maps are shit,
Like they did
even
down
in real
here
life.
this key Japanese
Imagine.
military stronghold in the south of the empire. The US and its allies first conquered nearby islands and then used these islands as a jumping off point to target the supply lines.
I
But
also
instead
watched
of
Pacific,
mounting
yeah.
an attack on this stronghold, the US focused on the supply ships that were bringing food, ammunition, reinforcements, and medical supplies to this stronghold. This left tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers stranded to die of starvation and disease. The US was able to take out a key Japanese base without having to fight a battle. The
That's
island
insane.
hopping strat-
Imagine you're waiting for like a supply of like insulin or some shit, or like morphine or whatever it is, and the last two ships they send both get sunk. Bro, you GG.
strategy was really working. And if you look closely at this map, you'll see that it allowed the US to bypass these heavily fortified Japanese islands, focusing more on cutting them off than trying to conquer them, while also getting the US closer and closer to the mainland. As 1945 rolls around, the US continues to beat Japan back. The two US forces converge to retake the Philippines. All these newly captured islands allow the US to deploy their new high-tech plane, the B-29 bomber.
Oh, classic.
This thing could fly super high and deep into the Japanese mainland and drop 20,000 pounds worth of bombs. Japan is clearly losing by now, so they start to resort to more brutal tactics, like having their pilots fly their planes into US ships in suicide attacks, a deadly tactic that not only led to immense damage to the US Navy, but also had a psychological element, a realization that the enemy was willing to go to great lengths to fight back. But even so, Japan's empire continued to shrink, almost as quickly as it had expanded. But the closer the US gets to the mainland, the more brutal the fighting is becoming. For a variety of reasons, there's really only one path to invade the mainland. You have to hop along this southern island chain and invade from the south. So the US sets their sights on perhaps the most important island in the Pacific, Okinawa.
I find it brain dead.
Japan
Sorry.
knows that the US is coming for Okinawa, so they
In a failing planet of, it's not like a last resort defense to protect your mainland. It's like, dude, an all-in to die attack for some failing expansionist plan is ridiculous. What? How am I wrong about this? It's ridiculous.
recruit around 40,000 local men, giving some of them only spears to defend themselves. Together with the army, they dig tunnels and caves and trenches and bunkers. The army gives out hand grenades to civilians, telling them to commit suicide instead of surrender, warning them that the Americans will be brutal and violent to anyone they capture. Japan wants this battle to convince the Americans that invading the mainland is a bad idea. It's their last-ditch effort to avoid defeat. The US hits the beach at Okinawa, starting one of the bloodiest battles of the entire war. 82 days of violence that leaves a third of the population dead. A total of around 100,000 Japanese, in addition to 12,000 American soldiers. And the US wins. They now control the most valuable island of them all, the island that will enable them to invade the mainland. But they're also left with a horrifying clarity of how serious Japan is about not surrendering.
Yeah,
about
it's like
fighting until the very end. Invading the mainland
the
will be
rat
costly.
strats.
Meanwhile, in Europe, Hitler and his allies have been defeated. The winners get together and issue a statement to Japan. Unconditional surrender or face prompt and utter destruction. Now that Hitler is defeated, the Soviet Union is also preparing to join the US to deal the final blow to Japan. But Japan doesn't reply to the demand for surrender, and the Allies see this as a rejection. Back in the US, in the deserts of the Southwest, The US has just successfully tested an atomic bomb. So now they have a decision to make. They either continue their momentum and invade the mainland of Japan and face not only Japanese soldiers, but civilian militias of potentially tens of millions of citizens ready to fight. And it would also involve the Soviet Union participating, which means if they won the war with the Soviets' help, they would have to split control and influence over Japan's empire after the war. Or, the second option was to use their new powerful bomb to swiftly end the war, with no more loss of American lives and much less Soviet influence in post-war Japan. They could do it on their own while also sending a message to the Soviets that they were the most powerful.
Guys.
On
I put too many video games, okay, chat? Guys, I'm not trying to be weird, chat. Forget about war and casualties and people being hurt. I find the concept of a bomb really interesting. Because I always found the bombs to be an interesting concept. Like the engineering and all the thing that comes behind it. It's just what it is.
August 6, 1945.
And in video games, I find them funny and fun.
They chose the second
video games,
plan.
of course. So like in real life, it's like
They dropped this unfathomably powerful bomb on the city of Hiroshima, releasing a hellfire the world had never seen and killing 140,000 people, almost all of them civilians, forever altering the course of history. 2 days later, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and began rapidly taking their territory. When Japan still doesn't surrender, the US drops another bomb, this one on the city of Nagasaki.
I always found interesting northern countries going to war. Like, people want to retaliate and invade their country, but you're going to barren lands of fucking ice and snow and despair with equipment that you're not really an expert at fucking developing and having. And it's just a fucking disaster, brother.
The Soviets continue to rapidly take territory, and it's more clear than ever that it is over for Japan. While some factions of the Japanese army still don't want to surrender, the emperor goes around them and tells the nation that it's over. Japan is unconditionally surrendering. The Americans moved in, took.
I'm pretty sure it's how Nazi Germany lost when they were expanding eastbound, right? And they were pushing, and they thought the plans would be over like in a certain amount of time, but they kind of overstayed their welcome, right? And the winter came, and they were just getting fucking clapped.
Away,
and then Battle of Stalingrad hit, and that was a major
Japan's powerful military prosecuted the war criminals and sent tens of thousands of troops to the vital island of Okinawa, where the US stayed as the occupying power until the 1970s, and where they still have tens of thousands of troops that serve American interests in Asia, while also being Japan's main source of security. The memory of this war is still in the minds of the people here, especially for those in the cities that were bombed and the southern islands that were invaded. And as this region becomes tense again, Japan is now expanding its military once again, mostly down here on these vital islands. I traveled here to see what that looks like and to talk to the people about what—
I'm not laughing about this chat. Yeah, sorry, I gotta stop. I'm laughing because every time I think of the frost, I think of trench foot. And maybe it's because I come from Quebec, and the language, the way you say trench foot, it just makes me laugh. I don't know what
this feels like, what they're worried about. And I'll be sharing that story in an upcoming video.
Let's pray that peace be now restored to the world, and that God will preserve it always. These proceedings are closed.
I'll be honest with you. I didn't contextualize what was going on in the East at the time. I hadn't. So the whole concept of the bomb, it's why the movie was like, yeah, but what about the bomb though? Like the whys or whatever. I just didn't really get it. No, I think this sets a easier picture. I'm not justifying anything. I'm just gonna. I kind of get it more in my head. I can put the pieces together. Okay, here it comes. Yo, this is X on the beat, yo. Okay. You hear my voice as well. That S. Anyone knows that boy? I don't know, he's just so soy. Anyone knows that boy? I don't know, he's just so soy. Again, that was pretty
good.
cool.